I met our special guest speaker for the first time just a couple of months ago. I'd flown to San Francisco for an industry event, and I decided to stop by his offices to meet him since he had so graciously accepted our keynote invitation. After spending just a few minutes with him, I knew I was talking to a product guy just like myself. Someone who's fiercely passionate about everything that goes into creating a stellar product. If you know product people, you know that they obsess over every little detail from concept to creation. This is evident in his company's product line that has set new standards for the world of pleasure products. He himself has received numerous product and graphic design awards outside of the industry, and I'd say that's some serious notoriety. His career has been highly influential, and his story truly inspirational. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our 2013 Pleasure Products Keynote in his first ever industry address, Jimmyjane founder, Ethan Mboden.
I don't want to be your sex subject.
It's also the first time I've had an intro song, and that song, so you know, is Kraftwerk, and it's Sex Object. And I was confronted with this conundrum last Friday. I received an email from Mo of XBiz that said, "So what song do you want to come up to?" And I thought, I have no fucking idea. And so I racked my brain. I ended up going on to Spotify, and I put into Spotify search sex, and then it came up with all these songs. I click and I listen, I click and I listen, I click and I listen. And then vibrator, I click and listen, fuck. And then I found this song, and I was like, I love Kraftwerk. It sort of tied in with my childhood beautifully. It always sounds like the future to me, even though it's the 1980s. I'm not German, but you know. And then I realized when I got some messages from my friends that on Facebook, Spotify was posting, Ethan's listening to sex, vibrator, fuck, vibrator, sex, vibrator, fuck. Anyway, so sometimes in this industry I feel like I'm wearing my underwear outside my pants. This is the title I chose, and hopefully it'll make sense by the time we're done here. I do have a piece of the future in my pocket here. It's a laser pointer, so I can get all the way over there. The way I put together presentations is just, there's a zillion slides, so we're going to get going. Somebody's phone here. I'm hoping that this can tell me how much time I have. Before I get going, thank you so much to XBiz, Alec, Mo, and the rest of the team for having me here. It is the first time that I've addressed a large crowd in the industry. Usually I'm talking to entrepreneurs in various categories. Last year I did something in Stockholm, and the thing with that is that in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, and in those worlds I can go in and I can do a half-assed job talking about entrepreneurship, but they don't know anything about sex products, so everything I say there is just genius. Here, what I've realized is that there's a lot of geniuses in the audience. Not a big realization, but in the conversation I had here earlier today on stage, in the panel discussion and so on, I just re-engaged people I haven't seen for a while. And so I don't know that I can tell you anything you don't already know, but my hope here is that maybe I can put things into context, that you can ask some questions of me and of one another and of your own businesses. So thank you, and let's begin. The first thing to know about any prediction is that it's pretty much going to be wrong. The Mayans were wrong about 2012, thank you very much, but a lot of what I posit here is it's not that far out there, so it may or may not be wrong, but give me some leeway. This is a telescope, it's not that obvious, but this is really just to symbolize that I'm just going to talk about the industry from my perspective. It's the only perspective that I have. It's very vibrator focused in this particular presentation, but hopefully you can extrapolate to your own experiences. So here's what we're going to talk about: the past, the future, and putting it all together, and then parenting. Parenting is going to surprise you again, or maybe not. It's just a title to keep you here for the whole presentation. The past, I was asked to talk a little bit about my past and how I got to be here on stage today. At first I was a little reluctant because it's not really about that, but then I thought it's actually very useful for that telescope reason. It'll help give some perspective on how I think about things and how I view things. From when I was very young, I loved looking at science fiction imagery and reading science fiction and watching movies and so on. This is a book that I had that posited all sorts of great things for the future, including cool-looking trucks, people that are super groovy, women with egg-shaped heads, and this guy back here, I'm not sure what he's doing, but in the background, he's like carrying something for somebody. Anyway, this technology is all to come. Actually, a lot of the things in this book came true. I don't know that we're going to have the Olympic Games in 2020 on the moon, which is what's being the idea here. So this is a high jump, very, very, very high jump. But this does influence our marketing. This is not something we put together for this. This is actually from an email that we put out. A customer said to us, actually no, Gizmodo said to us, Form 2, everybody's saying it looks like a tooth, it looks like this, it looks like that, it looks like a Tamagotchi. Gizmodo said, it looks like the Millennium Falcon. And I said, yes! It does look like the Millennium. It had not occurred to me until that moment, but this is sort of the ode to that comment. Before being here, and after reading science fiction books, I went to school as an engineer, undergraduate, and electrical and computer science, electrical engineering and computer science. And from there, ended up working in engineering, actually in the Human Genome Project at Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, the National Laboratory in Berkeley, and sequencing DNA, or actually creating a DNA sequencer to sequence DNA. This is what DNA looks like being sequenced. There was something missing there, sort of the human element and the aesthetic component that I was just trying to associate with engineering, which in fact is a part of design. Went back to graduate school, and I went to a school that was very non-engineering, Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, and there I did things like this, like figure and space, form, and shape studies. Very abstract, but then it all comes down to actually creating a real product at the end of the day. This is actually not my study, I should say. This is somebody else's that I found online. I then went on to work for a number of different brand and product development groups. The Arnell Group, Echo Design, Alchemy Labs, and ultimately Frog Design. If you don't know Frog and IDEO are two of the largest global design firms in the country. Frog is known for giving us the first Apple Macintosh, for setting the Sony design language, and so on. While I was there, I designed products for, or at all these different places, a huge range of different brands, from toothbrushes for Colgate to computers for Dell, cell phones for Motorola, eyewear for Nike, furniture for Herman Miller. I left Frog because I wanted three things. Self-determination, I wanted to know and be able to decide what I was working on. Second, I wanted to disintermediate the process, get rid of some of the people between me and the consumer, so that I could make sure that my designs were connecting a little bit more directly. And thirdly, I wanted accountability. I wanted to be held responsible for what I created, because I think that that's part of the designer's imperative. So I quit, and I started my own design firm called Plink. And then I came down here. I had 3 different people come to me and ask me to look into products related to sex. And at this point, I had never designed anything related to sex. I had designed shoes and toothbrushes and computers and a whole bunch of other stuff, but nobody ever asked about this. And all of a sudden, everybody was asking, so I came to a trade show with a potential client, actually, who had been working at Frog as well. So this was Andy. Actually, I'm lying. This is Venus just a couple of years ago, but it kind of looks like Andy did back then. I walked into a room that I was really pretty wholly unprepared for. I had had very little intersection with vibrators and so on, other than the occasional recreational use or gift or what have you. And so it was a bit overwhelming for me, as it is for many consumers, I think. And I was a bit taken aback. But as soon as I started realizing it's just a business for everybody else, I could remove all of that stigma and just see it as product. Once I saw it as product, what surprised me was that I was really seeing things, and I hope I don't offend anybody here, But what I thought I saw at that time, what was typical for branding was really association with porn stars. And I thought something different was possible. The tone was really either very explicit or really kind of goofy. And the pricing seemed completely decoupled from value from what I knew from cost of goods in other industries. The opportunity then for me, in my mind, was we could create something aspirational. We could create something that was implicit and provocative, and we could create something that's really, the price you pay is really tied back to the experience it delivers. It's really anchored in value. The products themselves, anatomical or humorous, the materials were often toxic, construction pretty shoddy, and performance was really lacking in terms of some of the key attributes you'd be looking for in a product. Again, an opportunity, something minimal, refined, safe, durable, quiet, submersible. I had this notion in my mind that it should look and feel like this. And I can explain that in greater detail, but this guy is having a good time. He's smiling. He's spanking this girl who, you can tell she's smiling from the shape of her eye. They're in this sort of high-low environment, right? It's kind of fancy, but it could also be not a Motel 6, but it could be any random sort of design hotel. Some champagne on the side table there, and anyway, I saw this spread in a magazine. And I thought, okay, this is the playfulness and this balance of high and low, and so on that I'm looking for. But actually, I was part of a company I would then later named Somatica, and this was not relevant to Somatica. Somatica was looking at internet-enabled devices. We were talking about haptics. We were talking about biosensing. We had an amazing prototype of an audio-responsive vibrator. This is in 2002. We were looking to be middleware suppliers to the industry. We would provide you with technology, you would make the product, we would get a licensing fee. We'd handle all the IP and so on. It was a genius idea, except when we started talking to people, or I started talking to people, nobody wanted any of that stuff. And so I did what's known in Silicon Valley these days as a pivot. In those days it was known as a what the fuck. I need to change directions. Went back to this. So to explain this a little bit further, that's Mark Jacobs spanking Sofia Coppola. And so the accessibility of the image combined with the aspiration was what was really inspiring to me. I started sketching, and then sketches turned into engineering, and engineering turned into prototypes. We really wanted to test the extreme, something that hadn't been seen before, something that was totally out there. A precious metal vibrator, 24 karat gold. But to make that actually rational, it had to last forever. So we made and patented the first vibrator with a replaceable motor. We then took that to even further extremes, adding a row of 28 round cut VS1 diamonds. We rounded this out because it's not just about vibrators, it's about this whole idea, this lifestyle concept in 2002. Blindfolds, fragrances, all natural, massage oil candles, which at that point were just soy you pour on your partner would be like, why the fuck did you do that to me? And they really weren't in the industry at that point. Some jewelry even. And then I sought a name and came up with Jimmyjane. It was the first name made everybody smile. I won't go into the details of where it came from. But from that double J in the middle, it's actually my Y, J, Y, right in cursive, came the mark, the double J. We launched, and that involved all sorts of fun things like shooting naked girls in the backyard of one of my friend's houses. That horrified my friend, but anyway. This was never seen this way. We don't really show a whole lot of nipple on Jimmyjane.com, but we launched. And the test really worked well. The products were picked up by celebrities were picked up by magazines, and suddenly we were in business. In this instance, Kate Moss was seen buying a couple of products that was written up in Vogue. And suddenly we were in magazines with vibrators and being published places that had never published vibrators before, and many that haven't published since. I was really defining a new media context and a new social context with the sort of people who were willing to be associated with the brand. Here's Paulina Porskova wearing her blindfold. And then we took it into a new retail context. Fred Siegel here in LA was one of our earliest retail partners. The only sex-positive retail actually we worked at that point in time was Good Vibrations, and maybe immediately thereafter, Bayland. This is us between Stella McCartney and Melanie Getz. A very different set of retailers. We even sold vibrators through Louis Vuitton's Private Members Club in Tokyo. Some of these partnerships still remain, some do not. But we really started looking where we could intersect with the consumer where they already shopped as opposed to requiring them to go somewhere new. We then continued to build out the product line with our afterglow candles, our contour ceramic massage stones, partnerships like the one we have with Pact and the underwear collaboration we did, creating a line of accessible vibrators by sourcing through partners, including Vibratex and Big T's, going to the original manufacturers of these original great iconic products and pulling them into our line so that our customer had access to them too, but they are exclusive to us in this color. A very successful concept for us. And we expanded our other lines and of course created the Forum line of vibrators. So here we are almost exactly 10 years later, not from the date of the launch of Jimmyjane. Jimmyjane wasn't really visible until the end of 2004, very beginning of 2005. But for me, it's been over 10 years. And so it's interesting to pause now and talk about the future a little bit. I'm going to turn back to books. I still collect all these books. I have, on the left there is a Sid Mead book. He came and spoke to us at Pratt. On the right, a book of the art from behind Star Wars. That's not photographs, that's the sketches that define that world. I always found it fascinating how those worlds could be created from scratch. Find the Naked Lady. This is Sid Mead. This is a scene from Blade Runner. There's the Blade Runner car. I mean, if you look at his sketches and you look at the film, it's almost identical. This is from Alien, of course. This is a concept sketch by H.R. Giger, who loved to have aliens penetrating women all over the place. It's really not Jimmyjane's aesthetic per se, but amazing, amazing nonetheless. And again, taken directly into the heart of that film. But then, you know, defining all the equipment and everything that everybody uses in that entire world, everything needs to be defined from scratch. Of course, that crosses over into sex sometimes. This is Jane Fonda as Barbarella in The Excessive Machine, which is supposed to kill her with excess pleasure. She blew up the machine because she could just, anyway. It's Jane Fonda. She was aerobicizing in there or something. And then, of course, we have Sleeper and the Orgasmatron. I do think that we're going to have all of these things and more. And it's not really a question of whether, it's really a question of when. But I'll return to that. On the biology front in the future, one of the resources, again, a book, I love to talk about the future, showing you books, is this Bible of ergonomics from Henry Dreyfuss, 1959. You open this book and you see exciting things like this. This is just a diagram of exactly how far it is from the tip of somebody's nose to their big toe when they're seated in this position, which is useful for somebody somewhere. But actually, this is good for designing, for instance, a chair. Here's a chair, the Tonette chair, which you've seen, whether you know or not, and you've sat in, whether you know or not. It's a classic. It's sturdy, it's effective. The ergonomics are impeccable. It packs flat, which is what you see on the left there. Extremely simple to make. New manufacturing method, bent wood, steam. This was made first in 1859, the bent wood chair number 14. By, I think it was 1930, they had sold 50 million of them. Here's a classic, sturdy, effective, with time-tested ergonomics. This is a product that has been a bestseller for 27, 8, I don't know, years. Here's a prediction. The biology we're dealing with isn't changing that much. A lot of the other circumstances around that biology is changing, but the reason that this is still a bestseller is because it's still doing a great job at what it was meant, well, actually, not what it was meant to do, I don't think, but what people adapted it for. That gives us some great opportunities. Here's a car designed first in 1963 and still redesigned and redesigned and redesigned. it also is a classic. The aspirations that it was targeting and the road feel and the handling, the geometries, a lot of that remained identical to the original spirit. The spirit was right. The car can remain the same. We have an opportunity in our category as well, and we're seeing more of this now, and I think the future will bring even more, of taking those products, really investing deeply, getting them right, and then maintaining them. This sounds more foreign here than it does to any other category. Form 6 was first designed in 2006, and I just heard from our teammate Molly, who's in the audience, that it was just voted #1 by Cosmo and #1 by Fleshbot for new products in 2012. So this sort of goes against this idea that we need to be cycling and cycling and cycling through product and pushing and pushing and pushing new stuff out. I would posit that, in fact, we're better served by doing a good job and then perfecting and perfecting and perfecting. You do occasionally need to abandon. We've abandoned products. But if it was an amazing product yesterday, make it an even better product tomorrow. The technology around us is changing so quickly, and you're probably familiar with Moore's Law. It basically suggests, and it plays out, that every 2 years the amount of transistors we can fit into a certain area doubles. The computing power doubles every 18 months or so, even faster. What that means is that this is an old graph, but now we're able to emulate a mouse. But in a couple of years, the computer will be as smart as a human brain. And after that, all human brains combined. And when you look at supercomputers, you start seeing things like this. And I don't know how much you guys have read about the singularity, but here it says, required for human brain neural stimulation for uploading. There's a moment in time that theorists are hypothesizing, Ray Kurzweil, the more recent, but he's just riffing on an older sort of theory from the 1950s, where when we reach the point in time where computers are smarter than we are, the computers won't need us to design themselves. They'll iterate on themselves. Those iterations, because every iteration will be a better computer, will go faster and faster, and then Skynet will become aware. That's a reference to Terminator. So basically, they're positing this idea, this singularity, which is that moment where this gross acceleration in the intelligence of the technology occurs. Again, the point being, all these things will come to pass, the biosensing, the direct neural stimulation where you've got an implant in your spine, or even electrodes on the outside, and so on. And I do think that sex after singularity will blow your mind, because anything will be possible. However, that's not where we are today. And here's where we are today. There are problems we can solve. There are problems we are solving, and there are problems we should solve. And I always ask myself, although maybe not quite frequently enough, where am I falling on this graph? This is somatica. Somatica was a problem I could solve, and it was a problem I was solving. It was not a problem that I should have been solving. And so I think this is always a relevant question, and this is something that I saw, it didn't say somatica, but that I saw online that really resonated with me a couple months ago. So I'm recreating it for you here. Attribution is important. Don't steal people's ideas. So here's something that probably doesn't need to exist. It's not a question of whether or not we can. It's a question of whether or not the product and the proposition is actually relevant to the real world that we're living in, the people that we're trying to serve. When you look at technology adoption cycles, you're probably familiar with this curve, this idea that you have the early adopters who really carry the product over to the majority. Those early adopters sometimes will drop your product in that chasm and never pick it up again. You need to cross the chasm, and there's a book that you can read called Crossing the Chasm or something like that. Here's another one. This is called the Gartner Hype Cycle. This is a little bit different. This is actually talking about what people are talking about, the hype. So you have the trigger in technology that sets off a new innovation. You have people thinking it's going to save the world. It's going to change everything. The peak of inflated expectation. Then you have the trough of disillusionment. There's a little bit too much poetry in this for me, but this is where the product isn't, and the technology isn't living up to expectation, and then gradually it does actually make it into the mainstream. So when you look at these two together, this is sort of a peak that comes even before this peak here. The idea, I think, that's important to gain from this is to be able to differentiate between things that are really up there in the hype, but not actually going to be reaching the majority, and things that are actually really already on this slope of enlightenment. So this is maybe way too much detail anybody wants to look at right now, but this is a map for a set of technologies. I don't even know what technologies this is. It's a huge variety. 3D printing is way up here on top of the hype cycle, which I think is correct. But what was interesting here when I was looking at this is that Somatica is here. It's sort of part of the Internet of Things, where every object is connected and intelligent, or not intelligent, but connected. Human augmentation, kind of, and mesh networks, kind of. All of those have a yellow triangle still. This is as of July 2012. And that's basically saying the plateau over here is going to be reached in more than 10 years. So Somatica is still ahead of its time. And I think you see that playing out. There are a lot of companies trying this internet-connected whatnot. It's going to be a little while before there are enough fax machines that people start faxing each other. Right? If that makes sense. The value of one fax machine, 0, right? Value of 2 fax machines, a lot more than 1 fax machine. The value of thousands and thousands of fax machines is very high. Right now we don't have any more fax machines, so it's kind of irrelevant. But because nobody receives your email, you're not going to send a whole lot of email. Yeah. Anyway, the idea here, it's all in the timing. And so it's really about focusing on design for the real world. And in fact, there is a book also for this, Victor Papanek. And some of these I actually really recommend you pick up. This is an old book. This is actually more about what people really need and responsible design. But it says here, why the things you buy are expensive, badly designed, unsafe, and usually don't work. That took me right back to my first incursion into the industry. Again, no offense intended. Not everything was like that, but a lot of things were like that. They were expensive, badly designed, unsafe, and didn't do what they said they were going to do. So, today, we're seeing an increasing number of intellectual property conflicts. Increasing, there aren't that many yet, but I have a hypothesis here. We've got Fleshlight and Tango, we've got Lilo and WeVibe, and if you ask me, I think the Rock Chick was sort of there and was both of those a long time before that. What we're moving toward is, I think, a series of deeper investments in product development by the firms that are involved, and that will yield more of these collisions. So deeper investments in product development will yield a deeper attachment to that intellectual property and fisticuffs. Nothing really to say about what to do about that other than to say, I think it is coming. And a lot of the patents that were filed, and I'm really looking from my telescope, in the era when Jimmyjane was first getting going, for instance, a lot of the patents that we filed, are all being issued right now. And I think that that's true for a lot of the other old new companies. I still think of myself as a total newcomer to this industry, but it's now been almost 10 years. A lot of the people that were starting work then, Lilo and so on, if they were filing patents when they got going, before they revealed anything to the public, those are all going to be issued right now. Culture. This is actually pretty old now, but I was surprised when I passed by a billboard in San Francisco where Levi's was calling out quite correctly that all asses are not created equal. It just was a surprise to me because it did not seem, it wasn't where I was expecting the brand to go, which I think is why they did it. But I think it's indicative of the culture that we're in and how things continue to shift and shift and shift, and people are becoming more and more comfortable, even in the very staid United States, with imagery like this, porn star lying on tinfoil. It's actually Marc Jacobs, again, holding his his fragrance, massive fragrance bottle. More relevantly, when we look at bigger trends, for instance, the sentiment around gay marriage, and you look back over the past 10, 11 years here, the gap narrowed between those who opposed and were in favor of, and crossed over, and now the majority are in favor. What's maybe even more interesting is that when you look by state and you look at those who are 18 to 29, who are all these reds. So on the right side here are yeses, in favor. Over here are no's, not in favor. This whole data set here, these are all states. This whole data set here, this is all the 18 to 29-year-olds leading the charge toward yes. This is 30 to 44, this is 45 to 64. Here are the 65 and overs saying no the most solidly. So basically, in every state except these bottom 10, anybody want to guess, because you can't read it, what that state is? Alabama. What this means to me is that we're moving in one direction and we're not going back. I may be wrong about this, but I don't think so. I think it's a ratchet. I think that younger demographic, so we're pushing and we're moving this whole category into the mainstream by all sorts of mechanisms, by better design, better product, delivering an experience, making it more approachable, better retail opportunities, and so on and so forth. We're accelerating a process that fundamentally I think is going to happen no matter what, which is that these 18 to 29-year-olds, who will be our legislators, our lawmakers, our president, and so on, they're all totally fine with this. And they're moving inexorably into power, into consumer power, into political power, into the buying position at that retail chain you want to be in. They're all totally okay with this. And as a consuming population, they're also okay with it. So we're moving there no matter what, I believe. It's a ratchet. Just like gay marriage. People say, it's not a question of whether, it's a question of when it will be legal across the entire United States. I'm all for it. Alabama, just a matter of time. I'm going to get you. So the cultural shift that's going on, that is so much more approachable, that our category is so much more approachable, is really changing who's here even today. And I think we're seeing the beginning of a major invasion of the innovators. You'll recognize these innovators because they have no prior experience in the category. They view their outsider's perspective as an asset. They're prone to long-winded discussions regarding the future of the category. The Innovator's Dilemma, another book you might want to read. And design thinking, an annoying concept. They're backed by venture capital, by crowdfunding, Indiegogo, you have it, you name it, their mom. They're pretty sure nobody's thought any of these thoughts they're having before. They have a headshot with a vibrator, and it takes one to know one. I just describe myself, and I think what you're going to see is that there's going to be a lot of this. And I think that I'm already feeling that here today. I had a couple of questions after our panel. I was approached by a couple of designers who are moving into the category, and that happens all the time. Almost every day I receive an email. I'm opening a new retail concept. It's going to be totally different from what's out there. I have a product idea. I mean, how many of you get, I have a product idea emails? Anybody get those? Just me? Okay, well there's a lot of product ideas out there, I can tell you. And probably a lot of them are really good. It's just that the headache of actually working with that person might not make it worthwhile. And I applaud, side note, Love Hunting for seeing them squeal through. I think it's remarkable they were able to do sort of a crowdsourced design project in this category. So the taboo that once insulated this industry and made it this little protected bubble that we were in is really just a light dusting of risque over any MBA's cappuccino. I get calls from people at Stanford, at Berkeley, all the time. Hey, I'm doing a project on vibrators. I've been involved in like 7 different undergraduate projects involving vibrators. It's just cool and neato for them. It's not scary or risque or taboo. It just has a little bit of edge, and they like that. It's a plus. That same effect, obviously, is being noticed by major brands. So we have Durex and Trojan, as we all know. We had Philips that came away a little bit bloodied by their work in the industry. We have others that, logically could move into this space, one might think. I don't know that Victoria's Secret's coming anywhere near this anytime soon. But really what we have is major multinational brand conglomerates that are really looking at this industry, and it's too big and too fragmented and too delicious for them to ignore. At some point, we're going to reach that crossing point where their fear is going to decrease enough that their excitement is going to cross over that, and they're going to say, fuck it, let's do it. Some of them already have, obviously, but more will. The thing to know here is that they could buy the entire industry. So when we're talking about these people and talking about whether or not they have the expertise, whether or not they know enough, whether or not it's too difficult to create a vibrator that actually works well, it's easy to underestimate, look at Philips. I'm all on board with all those arguments, but the reality is they'll just hire one of you guys, and then they've got all the insider knowledge they need, and they've got all the backing they need. And so it's really just a matter of time. Again, it's just a question of when. I think it's going to be a little while before we see more than Durex and Trojan. Durex and Trojan need to be a little more successful than they currently are before other people are lured into this space. But at that point, this question of when it was this sort of push-down economy before, this push-down market of distributors were sort of driving everything, it was who's your distributor. Now it's going to be sort of who's your daddy, who's got your back, and it will be very different for one of you to be a company that has, Reckitt standing behind you, or limited brands, or what have you. You have a very different set of concerns at that point. This is a moth. This is a peppered moth, and it looked like this in the early 1800s. This is a peppered moth, not so peppered anymore, in 1895. Stop me if you already know this fairy tale. It's not a fairy tale. So what happened between 1800 and 1895? And more importantly, in 1956, it went back to being like this. 1895, like 95% of the moths looked like this. Well, this was in Manchester at the beginning of the 1800s that the Industrial Revolution first started. And billows of smoke is an actual photograph. It's hard to see. That's the sun. Billows of smoke coated the city with black. The white bark of the tree where this moth usually hung out turned black, and all the white moths got eaten. So the darker moths survived, and moths got darker and darker and darker, and that's how you got this diversity or evolution. There's a selection pressure, which is the bird, that really decided who was going to make it through this. And I think that we're in this evolutionary cycle ourselves. The good news is we're not just moths that need to die to learn. We actually control our destiny. And so I think everybody's doing this already, but it's just a question of being heads up. But I think it's good to look forward a little bit and to contemplate what might be some of the selection pressures that will be acting upon our industry in the coming years. Imagine you are at Johnson & Johnson, you decide, yes, Church & Dwight and Reckitt have had enough success, let's launch a vibrator. You know what, let's go one step further. Since we make all these products that have Class 2 FDA certification, and it's kind of our thing, why don't we go ahead and make an FDA certified vibrator? We'll get studies that say it's the best vibrator, or that it is this effective precisely. We can make exactly those claims on the packaging because they are backed by the appropriate human trials. And let's go out there with an FDA certification. Suddenly, it may or may not be a selection pressure that's applied to all of us. And I don't have expertise in FDA certification. I don't know if you guys do, but between now and then, you might want to look into it every once in a while. We actually looked into it a long time ago and decided it just looked like hell. So this idea of labeling products for novelty use only as this liability dodge, well, first of all, that was a bit of a fallacy. It wasn't going to protect you a whole lot. Secondly, I think we're more at the point of for novelty use never in the future, where you really can't take that route. And I don't think that any real legal body, if you harm somebody with something that looked exactly like a vibrator, imagine I put out a bicycle helmet that looked just like a real bicycle helmet for kids, but it's just for play. And a kid wears it on the bike and is in a coma as a result of wearing this novelty helmet. Do you think the court's going to decide in my favor? I think the court's going to say, you had a responsibility putting this out there anyway. Moths. There was something really brilliant written over this that I didn't get. So I think the idea here really is, let's look forward to those selection pressures and try to anticipate them. So I'm going to give you a little insight into our insidious plan, or nefarious as it says here. I actually gave the same insight to a small group of people at Babeland who had an event back in 2010 or so. And then I wrote something sort of similar and as an op-ed piece for the AVN. I'm sorry to mention that name here, but and so I want to present the same idea here if it doesn't bore you too much. Here's what we're doing. We're not alone in this, everybody's doing this, but this is what we have been mapping for quite some time as why we do what we do and how we feel good about it. It's going to be hard for you to read, so I'll read. In this first circle it says, make the subject approachable and therefore discussable. Starting a conversation that educates and emboldens. Creating an opportunity for closer scrutiny and higher expectations. Raising the bar for success in the market and requiring the industry to respond. Which gives us, on the left, customer communication, customer education, customer empowerment, to industry accountability. Where this takes us next is a cycle. That industry accountability increases the percent of customers who have an improved experience. Those customers learn from and share their experience, evolving and reinforcing the selection criteria, back to this Darwinian market principles, for the next generation of offerings. And at the same time, talking to their friends as referrals, educating and inspiring new consumers to consider their options. So this is our customer now, talking to other customers and doing our work for us, all of us. So that evolution then favors producers who stay on or ahead of the curve, and that pressures all in the industry to either innovate, to imitate, which happens all the time in nature as in markets, or depreciate, meaning you can't sell a high price point product that doesn't have a high price point value to it, that doesn't actually merit that price point. Increasingly, that margin bubble is going to collapse. So customer satisfaction, customer loyalty, increased expectation, industry competition, and industry progress. I see this as kind of a pain in the ass for everybody, including us, but absolutely necessary, because the only way that we're going to succeed as an industry is by the customer being the one who wins. We're talking about the industry having been flipped upside down in the past 10 years, in my opinion. From, I'm a manufacturer with a distributor, or I'm a manufacturer and a distributor, I'm pushing product out to the stores, this is what you have to choose from my catalog of 2,000 products. And you work with me because it's just too much of a pain in the ass for you to find products elsewhere, and you don't really have any options. So I'm pushing this product out. The consumer gets what the consumer gets. So trickle down. Now what we're seeing is the opposite. The customer says, you know what? I like this, and I'm going to blog about it. And this conversation that's happening now is changing entirely the dynamic, where the customer is pulling the product into the store. And the customer went from being a rigid noodle to being a wet noodle. They can't push the wet noodle. So I think where we are now is we've made it into this virtuous circle of evolution of the industry, and I see everybody doing it. And I walked the show yesterday, and there are like 7 more shows in a couple of weeks. That totally confuses me, but when you walk those shows, you can see there's a real activity. People are really making cool product. So we've made it to that virtuous circle, and I think that's a very good thing. So here's an example of Jimmyjane putting these elements together, and you can be the judge whether or not we're doing so successfully. Started a little late, so can I run a little over? Okay. In creating our new vibrator, this was the thinking. Totally summarizes a couple of years of work and thinking, but stats you already know. 75% of women require clitoral stimulation to achieve orgasm. You can use whatever number, a lot of women. 78% of women who have used vibrators have used them with their partners. There are some asterisks next to that, but you get the idea. Couples, not just individuals, not lonely women, we all know this. 87% of women, this was a new one for me, masturbate with their hands. The percentages here wouldn't add up to 100%, but because people masturbate in many different ways. We're very inventive that way. You know, shower nozzle, pillow, humping, whatever. There's all sorts of different ways that people masturbate. 87% of women masturbate with their hands. So guess what we do? We open up that book. Not literally, there are other steps as well, but Here we are looking at specific data on finger sizes and so on. We turned to the hands, turned to the culture. So that was the biology piece. Turned to the culture, looked at, these are gloves by Philip Lim that said to me, we have all these images on our walls. We have this big wall with sliding panels, and we just put up tons of images of all the projects that are going on. It will range from a clipping from XBiz to a sketch of a new product idea to final renderings to marketing campaigns. We do all that in-house, email, newsletters, the whole thing. This image is up there, and this really said to me from across the room, this is going to feel like something. Like, this is exciting. I don't know what's going on here, but I get a sensation just looking at it. This said to me, augmentation. And this is right back to Alien, right? So here's that sci-fi thing again. Except this isn't Sigourney Weaver, this is a model in Vogue who was shot wearing the loader suit that Sigourney Weaver wore when she killed the mother, whatever. So that was looking back at technology. Then I went into sketching mode, and we have a team of designers. So we're all contributing to this, looking at different ways of wearing it on the finger, looking at what the power source will be, looking at how to hold it onto the finger. Actually, let me go back here. So this here says, think ravioli meets pod racer. That's how I describe this form to myself and to the team, pod racer from Star Wars. But just so you know, I'm not fabricating this whole obsession with science fiction in the future. How am I going to wear this? This is actually the vibration pod that we ended up with. And I will tell you and show you what this actually is. Here's the silicone finger pad that goes over it. Here's the entire assembly and how it all goes together. To make something really simple is sometimes really complicated. And the trick is knowing when it's complicated for the sake of being complicated and when it's complicated for the sake of making it simple. It was Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince, who said something along the lines of, perfection is achieved not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. And I think that's the basic design principle that we also live by at Jimmyjane. So here's a whole bunch of little parts, but they all go into this very simple end unit. And we detailed it to the nth degree in Jimmyjane fashion. This product will retail, or is retailing, for $65. It's the most affordable Jimmyjane vibrator ever. That's possible because of the volumes that we're selling it at, because of the engineering lengths that we went to optimize every single piece in here. And that still left us room for instance, 24 karat gold plating on the contacts, so that this thing will always make good, this battery pack here will always make good contact. It's really a question of leaving no stone unturned. We say the pleasure's in the details. What was the point of all this? The point was, let's take the most natural way that we touch ourselves or one another with our hands, the way that we explore with our fingertips, and let's power that. Let's basically graft a Form 2 onto your hand. And let's do that in a way where we'll acknowledge that this is grafting onto your hand. This is a robot suit. We're not going to try to make it disappear into your body, because that would be false. There's no way we can make this thing disappear into your body. Let's just be real and honest about it and have this thing that's a little bit outlandish that you wear on your fingertips and delivers 3 times the power of the most common fingertip vibrators out there in less than 1/3 of the volume. So now what that means then is that you can wear it in all sorts of different ways. It means that your fingers can go anywhere they normally would want to explore, even though now they're vibrating. You put that other fingertip vibrator on there, you could in theory use that product internally, but suddenly it's a whole different experience. You're very detached from the body and you've got this massive lump on your finger. So these two images are same scale. The opposable thumb's referenced in that title. Here's the opposable thumb. So now you can apply vibration internally and externally. It's hard to do on yourself. I haven't tried, but easier to do on a partner. And so there's all sorts of ways that you can use this product. And that's really another core tenet of Jimmyjane is we're not going to dictate to you, this is what's sexy, here's how you have to look, here's what you have to do. We say, here's a product with a bunch of provocative possibilities. We have a bunch of ideas in mind for how you might use this. We call them suggested uses. We put them up there on our website and so on. But people come back to us, they say, this was amazing when I did this. We update for our suggested uses. We're just creating these possibilities and opportunities based on how we know people are interacting with their body in the real world. So the idea here is to turn your natural touch into supernatural sensation, and to have nothing to learn, everything to discover. And we really see this product for the Jimmyjane line as an introduction and a welcome to Jimmyjane. Our idea has always been pleasure to the people. It's always been about, let's make this as broadly accessible as possible. Everybody deserves access to great products. I think that's where the whole industry is pushing. I mean, that serves us, right? If everybody has access, then we have a bigger market. So this idea of pleasure to the people, for us and the standards that we required, a lot of our price points were really elevated. Not elevated, by the way, relative to what it costs us to make those products. The price is very fair. Instead, it's elevated because we're putting so much into those. You don't get a 3-year warranty for free. This has a 3-year warranty also. We call it Hello Touch. So that's how we're putting this all into action. The parenting piece is really the final piece, and it's this. Yesterday, the market dynamic was opacity. It was a very opaque market. Distribution was industry push. The marketing was making big promises, and performance was really the approach to the products rather was really about diversify, have as many as possible, and some of those are going to hit. And that was the approach to thriving. Tomorrow, I think it's really about a transparent market. It's about consumers pulling the product into the retailer, going into, name the retailer you want to be in, and saying, hey, do you have that new product that I heard about from my friend? That's a success. Big expectations was big promises, now big expectations on the consumer side. Because they can have big expectations. Because we're all pushing each other to deliver more and more and better, which is good. And a focus in order to win, focusing on fewer products. Fewer is more in terms of delivering a great product. Everybody has a limited budget. I don't care how big you are. If you put that same budget into fewer products, those products are inherently going to be better.
Go ahead.
I think that the adult novelty industry is in its awkward adolescence. I mean, it's been around for a very long time, so maybe this is a second adolescence. But I think this is a public adolescence now. Now we're in the spotlight. We're really in the eye of the consumer and in the world. I would restate that the pleasure products industry is in its awkward adolescence. I'm all in favor of leaving behind the term novelty, and we talked about this in the panel, from this umbrella. The umbrella is not novelties. Jimmyjane is not a novelty company. A novelty by definition is a passing interest. We make products. So under this umbrella of products, we have novelties, we have products that are really focused on performance, we have products that are focused on aspiration and the luxury end of the market and so on. But I think this umbrella is, these are all products. There's a space for novelty. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with novelty. I'm just saying we can't all be categorized as novelty. I think that puts us in the wrong bucket together. So I think we need to be good parents. And I think that we have that opportunity. Nobody has the opportunity to sort of shape the market more than the people that are in this room. And that's it. That's my perspective.